Everyone here has talked about the importance of cooperation between law enforcement officers and the communities they serve, and it seems that everyone agrees that racial profile can undermine trust in the authorities and can cause resentments among the targeted groups. Minnesota is home to a large population of Somali Americans. In my experience, no community was more upset than the Somali community when we learned that a few Somali Americans had gone back to Somalia and become involved with Al-Shabaab. When I talked to the both FBI Director Mueller, and maybe more importantly, when I went back to the Twin Cities and talked to a special agent in charge there, both said that the Somali community had been cooperative in FBI investigations. And I think it was because of actually very good police work and very good work by the FBI in making sure that they earned the trust of the Somali community there. My questions are to Chief Davis and to Officer Gale. Both of you have served as law enforcement officers. How do you earn the trust of the diverse communities that you serve, some of whom may be initially skeptical of the police?
Thank you, Senator. And one stop at a time, one day at a time, one interaction at a time. I think we have to, one, acknowledge the history that police have played, the role of law enforcement with regards to race in this country. I think we still have generations of people that remember desegregation. We have generations of people that are still here that remember when the police were the enforcement tool and the rule of law with regards to Jim Crow laws and black codes. And so we have to acknowledge that we may start off with this lack of trust and confidence. So it's one interaction at a time. I think the first thing law enforcement can do is acknowledgement, to take our heads out of the sand and acknowledge that we have this horrific history. We should acknowledge that we, whether intentionally or not, still are engaging in practices that have a very disparate result with regards to people of color, whether intended or not. We should put our defensiveness down and realize we're here to serve, not to be served. And we have to realize that we are only going to be successful if the community engages with us. And the more we engage in that, the safer we make them. And the safer we make our communities, the more they'll then partner with us. With the evidence is showing, time and time again, after each major city and community, the stronger the relationship between the police and minority communities, the greater the crime reduction is going to be. So we do it one interaction at a time, and we do it by holding officers accountable, but we also do it by acknowledging that which is in front of us. I think there's no greater insult as a minority is for someone to look me in my eyes and insult my intelligence by telling me that there's not profiling when everything about me knows that it is. And I think that's what happens with our communities, and we need to stop doing that.
Officer Gale.
I think I agree with the Chief that you have to do it one person at a time, but I think you have to be more global. You have to look at the community you serve and the different populations in that community, and you have to make a concerted effort to be in those communities and having dialogue with those people, and you have to listen. And it doesn't matter that you might not agree with the things that they say. Years ago, I was in the military and I went to a leadership school, and they had a manual that said, any problem, whether real or perceived, is still a problem. And I agree with that, and I've held to that. It doesn't matter if it's not the actual problem. If it's perceived to be a problem by someone or by a group of someone's, then we have to listen, we have to validate it, and we have to dialogue through it. And I think we have to take agencies and train agencies to understand who these populations are that they're serving and what the concerns of those agencies are. I agree also with Chief Davis that, you know, we have to acknowledge the history of law enforcement has not always been one of stellar conduct. And I think that that's being done in a lot of organizations. I think in the Fraternal Order Police, we talk about it very honestly and very, very candidly with our membership and say, this is the way you need to go to improve your relations with the communities that you serve. And so it's important to do those things, to hear what they have to say. But it's also important to explain to them what the challenges are, what we have to do if we're going to protect people, what we're faced with as the challenges when we are protecting communities, and it's important for us to illustrate that to individuals in the community, because you know, no one's perfect, but if we understand each other better and we dialogue more, I think when there are these honest misunderstandings, we can move past them.
Thank you. Mr. Romero, in your written testimony on behalf of the ACLU, you wrote about recently uncovered FBI training materials that rely on bigoted stereotypes of Muslims. I think we can all agree that those materials are not acceptable. FBI Director Mueller acknowledged that those materials damaged the FBI's relationship with Muslim communities, and I commend Chairman Durbin for his recent letter to the FBI on this subject, and I'm working on a letter to express my concerns as well. Mr. Romero, what actions should the FBI take to show that it is serious about reforming its training programs?
Thank you for the question, Senator Franken. And yes, what I would first point out is, of course, those memos and files and training manuals surprised us. When we use the Freedom of Information Act, we go asking for documents that we don't know exist. And so we use the Freedom of Information Act as a democracy's x-ray, how to get documents that we need, that questions, hunches, based on conduct of what we've seen already, when the FBI has been tracking young Muslim men between the ages of 18 and 33, asking them to come in for voluntary fingerprinting and photographing, mapping out mosques. We had a hunch that they had to have some training materials that were going to be troubling and problematic, and lamentably, our hunches were borne out. I think, frankly, one thing that the FBI needs to do, I'd encourage, and Director Mueller is a man with whom we have great disagreements. We've sued him dozens of times. But for the record, he's a man of enormous credibility. He's probably the man in the Justice Department, both under the Bush and the Obama teams, in whom I have the greatest personal regard and respect, sine qua non. And with all that, I would encourage you to encourage him to take a much more active position on these threat assessments, which I fear are only the tip of the iceberg. The Attorney General guidelines allow now them to begin investigations on anyone they choose, so long as they can claim they're doing it to gain information on criminal activities, national security, or foreign intelligence. And the amount of reporting on those threat assessments is rather limited, as we all know. Asking those tough questions, how many of these threat assessments have been opened, how many of them are ongoing. They allow them to collect unlimited physical surveillance. We encourage the Attorney General to retire the use of these threat assessments, but at least at the very first step, you can ask the FBI to do more vigorous reporting on you, even if it is in camera. Retraining is essential. Because remember, all the folks who got that lovely little chart showing how the Arab mind is a cluster mind, and I'm quoting verbatim, is a cluster thinker while the Western mind tends to be a linear thinker. They were trained on this. So until we retrain them and tell them that that's not the case, was never the case, they're going to continue to do those activities. And so I think retraining is essential, and probing into the assessments and how those assessments have been used, particularly in the Muslim context, I think would be a place of important focus.